Great Scott! They've all gone mad! Hello everybody, my name is Ruffleck and welcome to this week's episode of Little Buck Big Bang, with a show where we get you the biggest bang for your littlest buck. So, this is a little bit old news at this point, but Sega has decided to release a good helping of their classic titles for free on both Android and iOS. So, as this is a show about showcasing really great video games for really cheap prices, I plan to go through all of these games to see which games are still worth your time today. In each episode, I will focus on several key questions about each game. Does the touch controls make the game unplayable or hinder the gameplay in any way? Is there any major differences between the mobile version and the original? And most importantly, is the game still worth playing today, or is it just a relic of the past? The second question will most likely be no in most of the cases, as the developers have stated that they want it to remain as close to the originals as possible. This also makes it easier for the games to be ported, as nearly no effort has to be put into releasing it once they have an emulator created. So let's dive right into the game, shall we? This week we'll be taking a look into Sonic the Hedgehog, the game that started one of the most well-known video game characters out there and a rival to Nintendo's Red Plumber. For those of you who don't know what the classic Sonic the Hedgehog games were all about, they were a bit simpler, yet very similar to today's versions. You grab rings, go fast, and stop Robotnik from turning all the animals into robots. Sonic the Hedgehog is a simple platformer with several unique traits that were always different from the others of the time. The health system revolved around the rings that you collected, but instead of a basic system where the rings determine how many hits you get, as long as you had one ring, you could survive a hit, which made the recoveries a bit easier, especially when you're going so fast through the levels. The games also had a bit of an edgier attitude, which always went against Mario's more friendly and vanilla demeanor. The games also focused greatly on the ability to get through quickly, and you were rewarded for doing more difficult movements, with quicker routes and the ability to go even faster without being stopped. Even though it feels like you're not picking up a lot of speed all the time, you can go really fast if you learn really good techniques. Before I became the massive Nintendo fan that I am today, I was actually a Sega kid. My first console was the Sega Genesis, and it's what made me fall in love with video games. I still have a lot of games that I remember very fondly, even if I never actually beat most of them. When I got the Genesis, it was a hand-me-down from my uncle, and it came with Sonic 2, but I never really actually had a chance to play the original. I did eventually get the game for the Genesis, but I still haven't had the time to actually beat it. I did also buy the game for an old iPod Classic I owned, and that's where I've spent most of my time playing this game till now. The controls on the iPod version made it nearly impossible to play, and it made it so I couldn't even beat the second zone. I'm starting with all of this so that you can understand during this review that this is actually my first time ever playing the original Sonic all the way through, but I do still have a big nostalgic vibe from just Sonic in general. So first, let's discuss the controls. I was rather surprised with how the touchscreen controls handled. It's better than most of the touchscreen controls that I played with in the past. I was actually very worried with the controls, as the menu was a bit too sensitive, and it can be a bit finicky to control while sliding, to the point where I kept sliding further than I needed to, and it was very hard to actually select the choice that I wanted in the menu. In game, however, the controls feel quite smooth and mostly responsive. As these are virtual controls, the physical feedback you'd normally have isn't there, so you can find yourself missing the control pad at times. But with the option to change the controls, it's not really that bad. The controls are definitely not perfect though. The momentum in the game made turning left a really big hassle and could make it hard to stop or even perform platforming properly. This became very apparent when dealing with one block wide platforms, and could make the game a little bit more tedious than it should have been, and often resulted in my death. There are very few sections in the game like this though, but they stood out like a sore thumb because of this. The sections that made you run left felt a little bit weird, which makes me believe that this is more to do with the touch controls than being entirely the fault of the momentum engine. Without having played the original game on console for a long period of time, however, I can't really say if this is true though. These controls are definitely not nearly as good as playing with a controller, but they didn't really get in the way of my fun as nearly as much as I expected them to. As the developers stated, they wanted to modify the ROM as little as possible to keep the game feeling as it did originally. From what I can tell, they did exactly that. I went over some of the videos of the areas that felt a little bit different than the original version, but they actually seem to be exactly the same. So from a cursory look into it, I'd say that all the levels are flat out port. There are some major differences from the original though. The most noticeable thing is that there's a save system that you can use in this game. You do, however, have the choice of playing the game just like the original original, having no saves and a couple of continues just before you game over. And if you game over, well, then you have to start from the beginning. I did give this a try, but as I'm not really great at the game, I didn't have time to grind it till I could beat it in one go. So a save system was greatly appreciated. This also helps a lot with making it more accessible while on the move, or if you don't have a lot of time to play. The save system essentially keeps track of your Chaos Emeralds and which act you are currently in. If you lose all your lives in this mode, instead of going to the continue screen, you are booted out into the main menu and you can continue your save from the beginning of the act you were on. You're not required to start from the beginning of the zone at all. Once you've completed the game, the save file will start you from the level select screen, allowing you to go back and collect all the Chaos Emeralds that you missed the first time you played. This version of the game also includes the expansion of adding the Knuckles cart, allowing you to unlock playing as Tails, Knuckles, and the dynamic duo of Sonic and Tails. There are 4 save slots, which is just enough to allow a save for each of these different playthroughs. Playing as these additional characters is locked initially and can be unlocked through defeating the game for Tails and collecting the Chaos Emeralds for Knuckles. This helps with the replayability of the game, as the original Sonic games were fairly short due to the hardware limitations of the time. The best change in my opinion is the resolution. The resolution has been increased to a widescreen render instead of keeping it in a classic 4x3 and just adding borders, like a lot of these ports tend to do. Sonic is most known for going fast, and having an extra screen space allows you to see a lot further ahead, giving you a longer time to react to what's coming. This small addition made the game a lot more smooth and going fast and reacting naturally. I always would be slightly disappointed in the classical versions when I would lose all my speed just because of a jump I had no idea was coming, and had no time to react to. With the scaling being 16:9, I never felt like I was cheated out of my speed or ended up dying to something that was off screen and had no way to react to. If Sega does port the rest of the original games, I'd be thrilled to find out that they are also in 16:9 and think it would be a lot more fun to play them this way. Now, the most important question I feel is Sonic the Hedgehog still worth playing in current year? In short, I think it is. The game is free as long as you're willing to put up with ads between each zone and every time you game over, or you can pay $2.79 to permanently remove the ad, which is a fair price for admission on such a classic game. This may be my least favorite of the classical 4, but I still had a ton of fun going through the game again. With the added save system and screen space, the game never really felt frustrating, even though there were some sections I would say are poorly designed. But even if the section was annoying, I couldn't get that mad, as I wouldn't be sent to the beginning of the game when I died, but just to the start of the level. And the next time I got there, I would be totally ready for it. Sonic the Hedgehog is still a decent platformer to this day, though you can tell that the developers were still trying to find their legs when it was originally created. There's not a lot of sections that are good for keeping speed after the first zone, and it appears to be a lot more linear in this game than the following titles. There are some sections that are even just flat out slow and rely on you to wait for a period of time. The more precise platforming sections could be a lot worse, but they are certainly not easy to handle, especially with the controls having trouble allowing you to line up a jump. As with the other Sonic games, you're required to beat 2 to 3 acts per zone, with the final act being a boss fight. Another issue I found with this game is that a lot of checkpoints don't have rings easily accessible, and have a lot of enemies right after, making it just easier to start from the beginning of the level rather than the checkpoint. Most of the water levels in this game were surprisingly less stressful, and almost all of them I never even heard the dreaded drowning music. The later water levels, however, got a bit too tight on the air bubble placement. I don't think a good distance was ever really found for the air bubbles, making these levels either too hard or too easy. The game as a whole is really quite colorful, with lots of reds, greens, purples, and yellows. The scenery does feel a little bit bland though, compared to the later games in the series, making it feel more like a skeleton version of the later games. The music in these games always is a massive plus. Even though this game isn't the best in the series, it was still a ton of fun to play, and the good definitely outweighs the bad. Sonic the Hedgehog has been a starting point for so many developers and gamers alike. It gave a whole generation inspiration and joy. If you haven't played the original Sonic, or it's been a long time since you played it, then there's almost no reason not to give this a try. The only thing that I could see that might stop you from playing is the amount of ads that pull you out of the game a lot. Sonic the Hedgehog is available with ads for free on iOS or Android, or the ads can be removed for $2.79. So go ahead and give Sonic the Hedgehog a try for yourself. Thank you all so much for watching. If you played the game we just showcased, please leave a comment down below and tell us what you thought of it. Or if you know of a wonderful game that could use a little bit of love, let us know and we'll be happy to talk about it. You all have a great time, and we'll see you next week.